Yes, Harry Ferguson. This is the video that a lot of people have been waiting for, including myself. I put a lot of effort into this. A lot of research has gone into this video, so I'm hoping that everybody loves it. Yes, Harry Ferguson, inventor, pioneer, among a host of other things that we will find out as this video goes on. There's a lot more to him than just tractors and farm machinery and that sort of engineering end of things. There's a lot more to him than that. Anyone that's new to the channel, if you haven't seen any of my earlier videos, I have videos on, if you're a Ferguson fan, videos on the T20, videos on the Ferguson 35, videos on 165 that we're currently restoring. So this is another part of the Ferguson line of videos that we are doing. So we'll just get into it straight away, no beating around the bush. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. It's great to get this video out. Happy Sunday to everyone. So yes, Henry George Ferguson, better known as Harry, was born on the 4th of November 1884 in the townland of Growell between Hillsborough and Dromore, County Down. He was the third son and the fourth child among 8 sons and 3 daughters of James Ferguson, a prosperous farmer, and Mary Ferguson née Bell. So yeah, his mother was daughter of Joseph Bell, who was the clerk of the Union in Newry, and a sister of Margaret Bell, the first woman to qualify as a doctor in Ulster. So young Harry, he had attended local schools until he was 14, and from there he left school and he went to work on the family 100-acre farm. However, friction between his relationship with his father, it intensified. His father was pretty strict, he was religious, and in 1902, after 4 years on the farm, Harry decided he was leaving. He was off to Belfast to work as an apprentice in the garage business of his elder brother, Joe Ferguson. He was increasingly fascinated by engines, as you can imagine, technology in general, engineering, and he took evening classes in the Belfast Technological College. The Ferguson's garage business was to become one of the biggest in Ireland in 1907. So as time went on, Harry began racing motorcycles, as we've seen from David Brown as well. So there's a lot of similarities between Harry Ferguson and David Brown in their career progression and what they were into when they were young. So yeah, he began racing motorcycles and motor cars mainly to publicise the business, to advertise their business. And a result of his risk taking and his love of speed, he was known locally as the Mad Mechanic. So around this time, yeah, aviation was a great novelty, with the Wright brothers having had their first flight some 6 years earlier on the 17th of December 1903. So yeah, this took an interest in Harry, and in 1909, Harry designed and built an aeroplane, actually, based on the descriptions of Berlow's monoplane in the magazine Flight. So this flight that he took part, he built his own plane. His first flight was at Hillsborough Park, County Down, on the 31st of December 1909, and that put him into the history books as he became the first person to make a heavier-than-air flight in Ireland and Britain, and the first native of Britain or Ireland to build or fly their own monoplane. So that's an incredible achievement for a young man at the time. So there is a replica of this plane still available to be seen. The replica is in the Ulster Folk and Transport Museum, and a replica has flown for the public in the north of Ireland in places like Portrush on demonstration days. An incredible sight to see, fantastic looking aircraft. And when you do look at it and you look at the design that it was built around, Berlow's monoplane as well, they are similar looking aircraft. So despite several crashes, including one in October 1910, which wrecked the plane and in which he was knocked unconscious, Ferguson devoted much of his time to improving the aircraft and to increasingly ambitious flights at McGilligan Strand in County Derry and at Newcastle in County Down. So of course his reluctant lack of attention to his main job, to his work and routine with that, that led to a rift between, between him and his brother. And in 1911 he left the business and set up his own business in Belfast, May Street Motors, which was later to become Harry Ferguson Limited. So his engineering assistant, Willie Sands, who remained with him for most of his life and was considered of most importance in helping turn Ferguson's brilliant designs into working machines. So after Ferguson ceased to experiment with flight in 1911, he again collaborated with his brother Joe and in designing and building an innovative car known to aficionados as the Fergus. Three were built. The Fergus was unsuccessful largely because of production difficulties between 1914 and 1918 because of the war and afterwards. And when you look at Harry Ferguson himself, if there was different I suppose economical and world situations at the time, he could have easily become Ferguson could have become an aircraft company, it could have become a motor car company, but it was the need for agriculture at the time that drove him in the direction of farm machinery and of tractors. It's also widely believed that during the gun running of April 1914, Harry Ferguson made motor transport available for distributing arms landed for the UVF. So that's an interesting fact. So in the course of the First World War, it was apparent that the loss of manpower and even horsepower removed from farms to further the war effort had left local agriculture in crisis at a time when more food than ever had been needed to be produced. So Ferguson, who had an agency to sell an early American-made tractor, was asked by the government to set up large-scale demonstrations in 1917 to show farmers how machinery and specifically ploughs could improve yields and reduce labour costs. He saw at first hand the problems with the very rudimental ploughs and other implements that were available for tractors. His own early experience with horse-drawn machinery and with back-breaking manual labour of traditional farming methods was useful in that he appreciated that current models were still based on concepts and physics of horse-drawn implements, and that engineers had not recognised the novel possibilities presented by tractor power. So it was at this point that Ferguson began to sketch out designs in which the tractor and its implements functioned in mechanical terms as one unit. We have spoken about this before in the development of the little grey Fergie. So he also saw the importance and the designing of interchangeable implements to work with rather than against the motive power, and the need to provide easy and robust connections between the tractor and the implement. His own farming background, I suppose, led him to think in terms of light machines that would be useful on small farms and wet lands. So when you look at Ireland and you look at the UK, small farms and wet land, it's not the prairies in America. So as time went on, he realised that such machines would be relevant pretty much worldwide, where bigger tractors would have been too expensive for farmers who were more reliant on subsidies. So in 1917, he and Sands designed a plough for a tractor, which was converted from a Ford Model T car, I believe. And a few years later, when Ford replaced this machine with the Fordson tractor, he went to Michigan to meet with Henry Ford himself. So it was at this point that Ford had offered him the job, but at the time Ferguson wasn't willing to get involved in a partnership. So Ferguson continued to improve the plough design, and in just 2 years come up with a 2-point or a duplex linkage, later modified into a 3-point triangular system to enable the implements to be attached to the tractors. The revolutionary linkage almost completely eradicated a major cause of accidents by making tractors much less likely to overturn or to tip up if the plough or something was impeded in the soil, depending on the implement that you were using at the time. The force of the impact was transferred through the top link point and downwards rather than forcing the front of the tractor upwards. So if you can imagine, if the plough got stuck in the ground and it was pulling, the force would point down straight through the top link, straight through and into the front wheels to keep the tractor planted on the ground. So it was also thanks to Ferguson's innovation. The tractor needed less weight to remain stable, and the plough could be lighter because it could be lowered deeper into the soil. So in 1925, he set up a partnership with the American Sherman Brothers and began manufacturing ploughs designed specifically for Ford tractors in America. So after only a couple of years, however, the business was wound up when Ford stopped making tractors and concentrated entirely on motor cars. However, once again, Ferguson was not discouraged by the setback, and he continued to work on a radical new approach. He began to incorporate hydraulics into the linkage system between his plough and the tractor, which will allow an automatic response of any mismatch between the force of traction or operation of the depth of work of the implement or its draft. So as we know today, so it's basically draft control Obviously, systems today on tractors are a lot more specific when you take in computers and wheel slip calculations and lower and up link sensing. But this is where it all began. This is the start of the system. So the new linkage system was further improved by the inclusion of an easy to operate hydraulic lift and lowering mechanism to allow the farmer to change the height of the plough without any dismounting. Ferguson successfully painted the plough draft control in June 1926, but had trouble interesting business backers, and there was also some technical difficulties that he needed to overcome. In 1933, Ferguson built his first tractor in his works in Belfast. So this prototype was painted black and thus became the famous black tractor, to distinguish it from the much more famous later models, which were grey, and it was marked as the Model A. So that's the black tractor. So moving on then into 1936, in a partnership that we've spoken about before. This is a partnership that he had set up with David Brown Company of Huddersfield, and the production of the Ferguson Brown tractor began, with the Yorkshire Company building machines and Ferguson both selling them and working on new designs. Although this was Ferguson's ideal type of business arrangement, and at first a relatively successful one, it lasted only 2 years, as David Brown wanted to make heavier, larger tractors, and failing to change Ferguson views, began to manufacture tractors in secret, actually, to start with, of his own designs. So anyone that is into David Brown, I obviously have a David Brown video made already that was hugely successful, so if you haven't seen it, check it out. So like almost every tractor made worldwide since Ferguson's patents were granted, however, the David Brown's tractors were designed around the concepts introduced by Ferguson in 1917 and 1933. It was at this time that Ferguson developed a partnership with Henry Ford. So moving on to October 1938, he demonstrated his Ferguson system, including his tractor, on Ford's estate in Michigan, and the two came to a gentleman's agreement, famously sealed by a handshake rather than a legal document, which led to its own difficulties down the line, under which Ford would manufacture the tractor and Ferguson would develop and sell it. Ferguson was unable to convince Ford that the tractor should be manufactured in Britain or Ulster, but of the 90,000 Ford Ferguson tractors produced by 1941, many reached Britain before the Second World War interrupted the Atlantic shipping routes. By 1947, the American plant had produced over 300,000 tractors. However, there were problems with Ford's new management, and Ferguson had already been making plans for the next stage of development. So despite the difficulty in obtaining financial backing and raw materials in post-World War Britain, and after intense negotiations with government ministers and potential partners, Ferguson and the Standard Motor Company began to manufacture tractors in Coventry in 1946. This is another thing that we've spoken about in our TE20 video. So 16 TE Tractor England models were produced, selling hundreds of thousands of units and associated implements. These were the world famous grey machines that revolutionised world agriculture. Standard components, including bolts in just 2 sizes, were used in assembly. This helped speed up production and ensure that one Ferguson spanner could be used for almost all servicing and repairs. Known in Ferguson's home region as the Little Grey Fergie, and in France as Le Petit Gris, the tractor was, for many farmers worldwide, their first and only tractor. It quickly became indispensable and beloved worldwide. Though in many ways he was believed to be a difficult and driven man and a very canny businessman, Ferguson was also a visionary, whose perhaps simplistic belief was that his system of agricultural mechanisation could produce for the first time in history enough food to feed all the people of all the world. And he's quoted in 1947 as saying, "A new wealth to enrich the world, that is our ambition, that is the course to which I am wholly dedicated." And if you take that into context with companies today, all they want to do is make money. Ferguson wanted to put a machine, put implements and mechanisation into the farms and into the fields of people who needed it most, and he absolutely has to be commended for that. Throughout his life, he was constantly urging governments to wipe out poverty by cutting cost of production, which would ultimately bring down prices. Although at times he seemed cocky and arrogant, he refused a knighthood for service to the Allies during the Second World War, as he had said that he only had set out to assist small farmers. So after Henry Ford's retirement in 1943 and death in 1947, his gentleman's agreement with Harry Ferguson was first challenged by the Ford company. And then when Ferguson refused to renegotiate it, effectively repudiated it with Henry Ford's II's approval. It was at this point that Ford started to manufacture a tractor very closely modelled on the Ferguson system, and Ferguson's tractors were no longer made and distributed by Ford. Ferguson's earnings in America dropped in 1 year from $59 million to $11 million. So an incredible hit was taken on the back of Ford's decision to challenge them and to make their own tractors. So it was at this point that Ferguson has set up his own manufacturing facility in America to recreate a dealer network from scratch, and he filed lawsuits against Ford for intriguing his patents and destroying his business effectively. The case was one of the most complex on record and dragged on for 4 years. Ferguson, who claimed he pursued Ford as much on behalf of the small-scale inventor, the rights against large corporations on his own account, received in 1952 a paltry $9 million. A lot of money back then, but in terms of what he had lost, it only covered his costs. Was very, very considerably less, much so less than what he had sought. So the following year, Ferguson sold his companies to Massey Harris, a North American machinery company, and he received a very large proportion of shares in the newly created Massey Ferguson company. He became the chairman, but only held the post for a year before resigning on the 7th of July 1954 after disagreements over design changes. So once he was no longer involved so deeply in business operations, he turned his attention to a company which he had set up to carry out research, and in particular, he worked on the development of a four-wheel drive and automatic transmission, as he had always retained an interest in motor cars and wanted to improve vehicle safety. No major manufacturer was interested in Ferguson's prototype saloon car, which had advanced features, but Ferguson's prototype of a four-wheel drive racing car, codenamed the P99, was built and took part in several races. We spoke about this before, yeah. So in 1962, after Ferguson's death, the famous racing driver Sterling Moss won the Oulton Park Gold Cup driving the P99. Ferguson's honours during his career included an honorary Doctorate of Science degree from Queen's University Belfast and Louvain, and an honorary degree, engineering degree from the University of Dublin, and a fellowship of the Royal Society of the Arts. Just on his own private life then, so in 1913 he married in Newry Registry Office Mary Adelaide Watson, daughter of Adam Watson, who was a grocer from Dromore in County Down. His brother Joe had previously been courting her, was unhappy to lose her. Her parents, who were Plymouth brethren, were upset that their daughter was marrying an agnostic. Throughout his life, she was his most important supporter and advisor. And on a holiday once in Jamaica in 1957 with his wife, he was shot in the leg by a burglar. His health slightly deteriorated at this stage, and he was subject to bouts of depression and insomnia. When he died in his bath on the 25th of October in 1960 at his home in Stow-on-the-Wold, Gloucestershire in England, he was found to have taken an overdose of barbiturates. The jury at the inquest at that point was they were directed to return an open verdict, so there was no real cause other than it was an overdose, since it wasn't clear whether he died as a result by accident or whether it was suicide. He was survived by his wife and their only child, who was a daughter. So it's pretty obvious to say that Ferguson's place in history is secure. His innovative engineering designs and his ability to get and produce affordably altered farming forever. He has not been forgotten in his native Ulster. Blue plaques mark his birthplace, his business premises and the site of his flights. There was a memorial garden at his birthplace, and the University of Ulster's engineering village at Jordanstown is named in his honour. There's also Ferguson museums in the UK and England and in Denmark, and memorabilia. Ferguson memorabilia trades at seriously high prices, and collectors vie for ownership of the little tractors. And that could be seen in the price that a lot of them are making these days. So yeah, when you look at some of his inventions, now I'm just going to cover some of them here, and some of his firsts. So he was the first man to build and fly his own aircraft in Ireland. So the first Irishman to build his own aircraft, fly his own aircraft, and I think indeed in Britain either. He was the first aviator to carry a female passenger in Ireland. He was the inventor of the applied weight transfer. Now these are all inventions that are patented to Ferguson. He was the inventor of the draft control, automatic depth control, automatic electric depth control, lower link sensing, top link sensing, suction side control, the converging 3-point linkage, anti-sway blocks, PTO placed central to a 3-point linkage, modern spring time tellers, modern weight transfer trailers, pickup hitch, linkage mounted transport box, spring loaded linch pin, everyone knows the spring loaded linch pin, detachable ball joints, and hydraulically operated tractor jacks. He has been as influential on the agricultural sector as the Wright brothers have been to aviation, and Rudolf Diesel has been to the internal combustion engine, and that goes without saying. So that is it for Harry Ferguson. I hope everybody enjoyed this video. An incredible man, and it's an honour that he's actually an Irishman. He probably would be a hero of anyone that's an engineer or inventor like that, like David Brown, like John Deere. You know, and it's brilliant to see that their names are being carried on today. A lot of the information that I got today, I'll have to credit the Ferguson Club, the Ferguson Society, dieb.ie, and then books from Colin Fraser and Norman Weiser. So yeah, there's great information out there. Again, as I always say, if anybody has anything to say about Harry Ferguson himself, there's any little bit of bits of information, I try to keep these videos to around the 20-minute mark. There's a lot more obviously I could put in, but 20 minutes seems to be a sweet point for these kind of videos. So if there's a little bit more information that anybody wants to throw into the video, and anything interesting that they want to say, if you live up in that area, and indeed if you're related to Harry Ferguson, or if you're from the Bell family, you're related from his mother's side, it'd be great to hear from you as well. Yeah, an incredible man, incredible engineer, and definitely changed the agricultural world. So that is it for Harry Ferguson. I will see everybody during the week with our next video, which will be the continuation of our Chamberlain series. So our next Massey Ferguson video will be on the 100 series in a few weeks' time. I'm working feverishly away at it. So it will be coming out in the coming weeks, and I know everybody's looking forward to that as well. So thanks for watching. If you liked it, share it, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and again, thanks.